G'day, citizens of the Mortal Realms, AOS Coach, and we are here not talking about TOs. I'm going to fix that up in a second. I was so excited talking to Nick, my guest, that I completely forgot to change the background. We are talking Cities of Sigmar, and my guest, Nick Rau. Yes, I got that right. Yes.
You did. Got it.
Boom. There we are. We're back. We're on City. Look, we're talking Cities of Sigmar. My guest Nick did incredibly well at the Nova Open. You went 4-1,
Yep.
and I think it's the time for cities. You know, we haven't seen a lot of good cities coming up lately. I think. Well, I kind of lie actually, and we'll get into the weeds here and why this show is happening. We had Living Cities doing really well.
Yep.
You know, we saw, I think, Gavin do really well with Living Cities. And then that triggered this whole bunch of Living Cities type stuff. And then it got FAQ'd. No longer can you use that strike and fade to move forward, which meant like Fulminators and Dragons and all of those things that you could use that had a really good shooting attack and then a combat profile. And that was kind of like, Nick, I don't know what you noticed, but a lot of 3rd edition Cities of Sigmar was very heavily Living City.
100%.
When that rule changed, it kind of went, whoa, wait a second, what are we going to do? Because the rule wasn't very good anymore, so you don't want to use it. But what city is the best city? Which leads us to this discussion. So before we get into it, Nick, g'day, welcome. Introduce yourself. Other than Nova, 4-1, champion of the Mortal Realms.
Nick Rau, been playing Age of Sigmar since 2.0. Really enjoyed kind of when they changed up the rule set, and just really gravitate to cities. The idea of a bunch of survivors, just regular me and yous out there against these 8-foot tall chaos warlords, you know, just trying to survive. And then having a set of units that you can pull from that are so vast, so deep, and so unique that sometimes the opponent's going, hey, what does that do? That looks really cool. And it's just a lot of fun to dig into it. It's like putting a puzzle together. So I've been doing cities for a while and I really enjoy it.
I love cities. People know I'm a cities person. I'm an Empire player back from like 3rd, 4th edition fantasy, and that was my one true love. So all of those idiots, like I love my puffy shirts, I love my mustaches, I love my cod pieces, I love my feather and my caps. But I feel that same kind of feel. Like when I play Dungeons and Dragons, I love to play the human. You know, I love this idea of these. Even like goes back to like we used to have militia. We just had literally peasants with no shoes, with like a pitchfork and like a sickle and whatever they had from the farm, just to defend their house. And I love that underdog, me versus the big beasts and the crazy chaos and just pure brute training and regiment and just people to fight, which is why I love cities.
Yeah. There's a lot of that we can, you know, put ourselves in that type of thing. It's the, you know, what would I do in this situation? When you hear the free geared captain, you know, like, all right, calling all the people, or it's your watch shift, or it's time to charge. Like, you could be that person if you were in the Mortal Realms. And then what do you do in that situation? And it's really cool to kind of, you know, get yourself into the game that way from a lore perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot of personality in the cities. You read a lot of the stories, and like when I listen and read to the stories of like the Stormcast, you can't relate. Correct. But like I'll never forget, there was a story leading into the malign sorcery, which was malign portents, which was the lead in, and I'll never forget the story of this son and father who were, what we found out were like Nurgle disease rotted, or like they had an infliction. And the Stormcast started coming to their house and like, yay, Stormcast is here to save us. And the Stormcast killed them because they're like, well, you're inflicted by Nurgle's rot and you need to die. And like, we can all kind of like relate to sickness, and then Stormcasters come in and it's always funny, like reading the book, like is it Cities of Secrets? I don't know if you've read that book. It's based in Excelsior. You see what like the guard captains think of the Stormcast, and not all of them like them. They're like, oh, these guys are the glory hogs. They just come in and like steal the day, and we do all the hard work. But that's why I love cities. Cities are so much fun. So what got you into them? Is it just that the story? Is it the us versus them? Obviously the model range is quite deep.
Yeah, I think I come at kind of the way that I approach armies and the way that I really kind of want to get into them is kind of like from 2 points. The lore perspective first is like, can I relate to them? Do the models look cool? Is there something about them that hooks it that I can, be proud of when I put this thing on the table? And then secondly is like, what are the rules? Is there some uniqueness to it? Is there something about them that are different than the rest of the meta that other people are playing? And Cities offers that in spades. There's so much variety. Each city has its own uniqueness to it, or at least attempted uniqueness when they were made. And so, like, you can say, "Oh, I am," as you talked about living cities, or "I am Tempest Eye," or "I'm a wizard and I'm from Hallowheart." Right? There's something about it where it's like, I'm not just Stormcast X variety. Or are you Stormcast Dragons or are you Stormcast Judicators? No. I'm Tempest Eye. And then what does that mean from there? Are you shooting? Are you fast movement? Are you KO? Like all the different aspects, it extends further beyond that. So that's really what got me into Cities, was the idea is that you can pretty much do whatever you want inside of Cities, and then even narrow it even further to fit kind of your unique play style.
It's a list builder's dream.
Mhm.
It's both a list builder's dream and a new person's nightmare. Because if
True.
I'm a new person, and I would never recommend Cities for somebody who's brand new, unless it was obviously your passion. If you're like, I really want Cities for X, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. But when you get into Cities, there's so much analysis paralysis because there's so many internal synergies, right? You've got the Phoenix Guard type, the Phoenician, but then you've got the Duard, and you've got what was formerly the Wood Elves. You've also then got the formerly the Dark Elves, the Darkling Coven. Then you've got the former Empire, and it's wonderful. But then there's so many internal synergies, right? And if you need something that's melee, then you've got hammerers, you've got Phoenix Guard, you've got so many different great sword. Like, do I take great swords, executioners, Phoenix Guard?
Yeah.
And then you just go down this path, and then it's as a list builder, you love it. As a new person, it's confusing.
100%. Yeah, and I think that some of those traps, I would say, exist because you might say, "Oh, I love Hydras, and I want to play Hydras, so I'm going to play Anvil Guard." Well, maybe Misthaven is better. You want those flanking Hydras coming in from the board edge or from 9 inches out, and you're going, "Oh wow, I didn't even think about that because I've been told Drakeborn Curses is where I want to be." No, there's a lot more variety inside of that.
It's funny you mentioned that, actually, because I remember talking to a Phoenician player, because Phoenician is such a contradiction when you look, and we'll get into the details, and we'll show you all the different things, and we'll discuss the rules and Nick's list as well. But I know when I was like looking at Phoenician, it's such a contradiction because it really rewards you on, let's say, Phoenixes and Phoenix Guard. Super durable, anointed on Phoenix has like a 4-up ward, 12 wounds. Like, it's super durable. But the allegiance ability is all about things dying. So it's like, am I better off putting my Phoenix build in? And this is probably one of the interesting things. You can take the same 2,000 point list and move it from Phoenician to Hammerhole to Tempest Eye. Not literally change your model, obviously your artifact spells,
Yeah,
but the army changes a lot just
and
by just the rules you have access to.
and the way you have to play it changes a ton too, because those cities have their own play styles that are rewarded based upon those general command traits or artifacts that are limited, but also, and then the spell lists, those trigger out different whole sets of things. But so you say, yeah, you take a 2,000 point army and you move it across the board. Like if we took the 2,000 point army that I was playing and you switched out the KO for, you know, Sylvaneth, like that can't play in the same army. They do not play the same style.
No. If only we could bring in Slanesh. And yes,
Oh man, maybe there is some in there.
opening up the Christmas present a little bit. There's some other things, right? Like Cities of Sigmar actually can bring in Sylvaneth. It can bring in Kharadron Overlord. So if you ever wanted to bring in, I always wanted to start a little force, or I always wanted like a gunboat, or I always wanted to bring in some, I don't know, some balloon boys. There are ways to bring in other parts of the faction. and they're not allies, which is really cool. And I think the strengths of the faction really show off just the diversity, and it can really mirror whatever you like. If you're someone who loves magic, you can build a magic. You want to have a melee force, you can build a melee force. You want to do shooting, you can do shooting. You want monsters, there's monsters. If you want like a horde of idiots, there are a horde of idiots. Like whatever you want, the build is there, and they are a jack of all trades, but I think they're a master of none. They're not the best at anything. They're good, they're a utility, but they're not the best.
Agree. I think Cities of Sigmar is the Swiss Army knife, right? It's you build it to cut into the meta spot, and you get the wins where you get them, but you're never going to be the best at every piece of the army. You got to pick one thing and say, okay, I'm going to be the best at this, and here's my supporting things that are going to get me through. And I think that's what Cities does really well is cuts those spots out where it can be successful.
One thing that I was really thinking about, in this particular edition, so if you're watching this, at the time of recording, we are in Galette, which is all about Gledian veterans and bonds of battle and all that stuff. And when you go through our army, a lot of our units are GVs. There's a lot of battle line options, which is a positive. It means we have a lot of options to be scoring the proving ground. You'd be able to, handle all of the battle tactics. But as you know, Cities of Sigmar outside of like Phoenix Guard, they die to a stiff breeze. They don't have the best armor saves. Most of our people are GVs. How did you find that at Nova, being that Nova is certainly one big tournament, very competitive in the meta. People go there to win it. How did you find the GVs? Did they die to a stiff breeze or what?
I think that kind of goes into the list building piece of it and trying to figure it out is how afraid of bounty hunters was I? And if I'm very afraid of bounty hunters, then all of my units are going to be cheap, tradable units. They're going to do something and then die. So that's the Longbeards, right? They're going to provide that bubble of that reroll ones to hit, but they're a 4-up save, 3-up against melee, and then a 2-up when they're on the first turn. So you're negating one rend effectively. And so I felt Expert Conquerors was probably the most important battalion for this tournament. There was 2 missions that were 6 objectives, 1 mission that was 8 objectives, 1 that was 3, and then 1 that was the Realmstone Cache, which is the biggest bounty hunter mission that you can get, right? For 2 turns, there's only 1 objective that can be scored. And so this tournament kind of shaped the way that the list was going to be built. And so I went heavier into the GVs, mostly because I wanted that frontline Longbeards. I wanted fast moving regular troops. So I went Dark Shards. You could go with Dread Spears. They both move 6 inches and have that good save, but you need that 6-inch move type of piece to it for that GVs. So when somebody goes Proving Grounds and picks it across the table, you're like, all right, I go 15 inches, with a run. You're just like, boom, all the way across over there. And so having those GVs that could get to the objectives quickly, which is what Tempest Eye does, and which is why I wanted them in there. And then the Longbeards, not Longbeards, but the Iron Drakes have to be GVs because you make them. They're just 300 and something points. You have to put them into your battle line slot. There's kind of obligated to based on the points of everything else. But there's a good thing to be said about putting 20, Iron Drakes on a center objective, which is you want them in the center table of anyways, with that front Longbeard screen. And so that's really putting that GV to use. There's no way somebody can just go Proving Grounds to deny you that. You can now Proving Grounds to deny them that, which happened in the Nurgle matchups that I was having, which is what I was really afraid of just like throwing 20 Blight Kings or, 15 Blight Kings or 30 Plague Bearers on an objective, and I can never get them off. But you know what I can do is I can put 40 of mine and I can take it.
Yeah. Yeah, you play the long game, the objectives, and with the amount of bodies. And I think one thing I love about cities as well with the GV is, yeah, you can feel powerless because a lot of your army can be GV, but you have a lot of battle line ifs. So I'm someone who runs a lot of free guild. I'm, like I mentioned, I'm an Empire player back in the day. Yeah, I've got other models, but you know, my heart is with the free guild. I can still bring a unit of Phoenix Guard in, and yes, they're one wound idiots, but they're not battle lined without the Phoenix Guard general.
Yeah.
So I can, or the anointed on Phoenix. So I can tap into those types of things. Or if I'm really worried about GVs at the moment, I've got Pistoliers as battle line. I've got Demis. I can't remember if Demigriff's a battle line or not, but you know,
They
I've
can
got
be.
some
Yep.
mounted cavalry. We were talking earlier on the stream. You got the Drake Spawn Knights can be battle line. Um, or you know, like there's so many ways to fulfill your battle line that can avoid the GV if you're concerned. And actually, it's probably why I think Pistoliers went up 5 points, and I think
Yeah,
Outriders went
I
up.
agree.
Like what? Like, why did Pistoliers go up 5 points? Because it completely skips the GV meta.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's sometimes where you don't want to play any GVs, where you want your screens to be 2 wounds that can take a hit. You don't care about bounty hunters, and you just move it. That's what we're kind of talking about with the Drake Spawn Knights, right? A 3-up save, you know, like you just 2 wounds get up there, and you're like, all right, clear these, and then you can get through. And so like they can make a lot of space for your army, which is something that cities needs. Like cities need space to be able to get all of their stuff to be used. And so I even saw some ideas of using the idea of those 80-point chariots, you know, taking that cheap heroes and then, you know, working off the adjutant rule and other pieces. But there is so much board occupied space that 3 chariots take up. Like across it, you're looking at 12, 18 inches of just area denial when you put them sideways.
I've been using one Stormcast Chariot, and it's a bit more tankier, but it costs a lot more points than the Scourge Runner or the Drake Spawn Chariots. But yeah, the being able to push it up the board can take control of an objective. It takes up a lot of board presence. It can take a hit and deny your opponent getting into the other parts of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Scourge Runner Chariots, and as well as the Drake Spawn Chariots. There's just so many great options, which is what I love. And maybe this kind of leads me into, is there any units with this particular edition that maybe you'd recommend, like their glow ups, or maybe things that we haven't seen in the past that maybe, I mean, hell, the last like 6 to 9 months, it's always been about maximize your Stormcast points in
Yes.
cities. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know that just yet, 1 in every 4 can be Stormcast, and they're not allies. So it means that you can take a reinforced unit of dragons or Fulminators, or you can bring in Krondus or Karazai. Spoiler, I love bringing in Krondus in Tempest. I love Krondus in Tempest.
Yeah, there were some early tests where I was trying it out as like the Alpha Strike, Krondus, Aura of Glory with some Fulminators at his side. And we're like, okay, could this work? You know, like testing that out.
Karazai in Hammerhole is really good if you get the right deployment maps.
Yeah. But from a glow up standpoint, I think we started to see a little bit of it. And I took Delaria Von Dest. I think she is fantastic because it gets to this idea of like, are you taking Purple Sun or are you taking anti-Purple Sun? And if the meta is all people who can cast, having something that shoots for 4 damage at those casters twice, like I was picking off Nurgle casters, dropping what was it? I dropped a chaos, like a chaos on Manticore. Like you have a 5-up save. Now you just went to a no-up save, take 8 damage, and I just have to breathe at you and you'll die after that. There was a lot of these like pieces, but the thing that really helped out, and I think you'll see as the cities line kind of evolves into this new stage of, we're seeing it with the Hexbane piece, is that 5-up ward save. Like that's not something that's normally there on cheaper units. Like you pay the premium 175 points, like you're talking Phoenix Guard for that block of 10. Now you can get the Hexbane, you get a guy, and you get a unit right for 180 points with a 5-up save. They move, they do some decent damage. They're doubling up against demons and wizards, which is, you know, frankly, I would say probably 30% of the meta out there. is easily things that they're going to be hitting in demons or wizards.
Would you
And
take
so-
Daddy? Because
Say again?
I can't justify Daddy. So you've got Derilia, which is the daughter with the crossbow,
Yep.
and then you got Daddy Galen. Galen
Yeah.
is the combat old man, and I can't justify. I look at him, I'm like, no,
No.
you do
No.
not want to be in combat.
No. Like it's cute, but at the same time, like you can spend those points better somewhere else. Like he's neat, but I'd take a free guild guard, free guild general. He's doing about the same damage output. He's 20 points cheaper, and he's buffing your army a lot better for synergy, right? The thing Cities doesn't need is a 100-point combat hero, right? That just doesn't fit with the rest of what the lists are trying to do.
Any other units? So we'll talk about the Hexbane soon, because I've got the War Scroll that I'll bring up, because I want to talk, because that's probably one new unit that we've gotten that I haven't talked about in a live stream. So we'll definitely get into that. But outside of the Hexbane and like Derilia, is there any other units that you think are worth considering, or ones that maybe people either high in your list choices, or ones that used to be hot garbage and now you're now reconsidering them?
I think one of the things, if I wasn't playing Tempest, I would be playing Shadow Warriors. I think Shadow Warriors are extremely important for a Cities type of list, right? Cities lacks the ability to get to the other side of the board once the opponent puts up some type of screens or other type of things, right? You can punch through the first line, but then it becomes a slog. And getting those objectives where you just drop the Shadow Warriors in, steal an objective, shoot off a 5-man unit, kill a single 5-wound hero for 120 points, it gives you that ability to, like, a lot of the times they get forgotten. And when I was doing a lot of testing at RTTs, like these were things that were just like slowly winning you the game, where it's like, okay, we're all fighting here in the middle, maybe a little more on my side. And now I just drop something in your back line on your back objective, kill your support hero. The whole dynamic changes. You have to go back and deal with it, or you give it up constantly. And the way objectives are scored with hold 1, hold more, or hold 1, hold 2, hold more, getting that hold more, stealing that 1 usually gives you a solid point advantage for pushing it. So I think Shadow Warriors at 120 points, kind of does it.
It's interesting because I used to run a lot of I always had one unit of Shadow Warriors in my Halo Heart build, but then I switched out to use Canary from the Daughters of Cain as an ally, because I can get one for cheaper. It's less wounds. It is less wounds. And now that the Canary can move after shooting, it does mean that, and I think it's probably one thing. If somebody screens really well with the Shadow Warriors, you've got to be 9 out. Yeah, you can shoot at them, no problem, but it's hard to cap those objectives. But the Canary allows me to move in and then steal the objective, but they're not as durable, especially if you, Shadow Warriors get a bonus if they're in cover.
Yeah.
So if you can pop them into, so if you can get them into cover, there's 10 bodies. I really like Shadow Warriors. The one that I'll call out really quickly, I think is a bit of a no-brainer at the moment, is the Rune Lord. Straight up, the Rune Lord with the +2 to unbind. You can use a heroic action to make it do another unbind, because it's not a wizard. So you can try to just straight up trying to deny endless spells and magic. It's a great one.
Yeah, it's been great for a long time. And Arcane Tome added a lot to it, because now you're a wizard, you get an extra cast and deny, and it just says as long as you deny, you get the +2. So now you got 2 denies at +2. That's hard for some things to overcome. And I like that you brought up the allied for the Canary Heart Renderers piece, because that gets into the bigger discussion of, do you take the Kronspine Incarnate or do you not? And that's kind of another decision tree for Cities. Because the Kronspine, I find, is extremely important for what Cities is trying to do. But then there's an also path is there more bodies and more flexibility that's better? And so that's kind of a good piece.
I think one thing that Kronspine brings is I'm going to get to the rules, I think, in a second. I think we're kind of getting into the weeds, which is a good discussion. But I think, what's really clear at the moment is you went 4-1 and, spoiler alert, you did have the Cron Spine.
Mm-hmm.
But on the same weekend, or maybe the weekend on either side, Tom Guan went 5-0 with Hallow Heart Cron Spine. So we're definitely seeing the Cron Spine adding a bit of a mixture, right? And you'll add where this comes into play. But it fills a gap that we don't have, which is that tanky, durable piece. Like, monsters that aren't heroes are what? The Charybdis, the War Hydra.
A couple Phoenixes with nobody on them.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah.
And everyone else is a hero monster.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get some like a real tanky wound type model, you've got to go into like Stormdrake Guard. You've got to go into your ally pool. You don't have that tanky type piece, and we don't have a lot of fast pieces either.
Yes.
And the fast pieces are normally heroes, so it does kind of cap you a little bit. So yeah. Anyone else you kind of call out before we move into the rules? I think we are moving into rule territory.
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of it we know what they do, what they are, but I think the glow up happens when they end up in different cities, when they end up in different lists, and says, okay, it's much better in here than it is here somewhere else, and I think that's where kind of those come in.
Yeah, and what's really cool is I think, regardless if you want to start your list with a free guild, whether you want to be Duarden, you want to be there's some interesting builds, as you mentioned already, the Drakespawn Knights. If you want to go into either I know this is not Drakespawn Knights, but you want to go into Darkling Coven with the sorceress, the little stabby sorceress, or you want to go into the more of the Dread Spear type not a Dread Spear, the Drakespawn side.
Yeah.
There's so many different varieties, even like the Nomad Prince with the what's their shooter, the Glade Guard? No, what's the shooters? The Sisters of
Thorn.
Sisters of the Watch, Sisters of the Thorn. Yes, one of them's the magic horses, one is the shooties. But either way, like there's a lot of good list variety, which is what I love about cities. So what I might do is I might get your perspective on some of these things, right? So first off, as a Cities of Sigmar player, I have a lot of different sub-factions. And for anyone who maybe is newish, you might look at this and go, wait a second, where are some of these, or what are some of these names I'm not recognizing? You got Excelsius, Misthaven, Harkuron, Settlers Gain. These are additions that were added through the Broken Realm series. Yep. So some of them have some additional rule restrictions. So is it Misthaven and Harkuron doesn't have the Stormkeep? I know there were some changes with like
Harkuron loses the Stormkeep. That becomes like you get Marathi and you get the Daughters of Cain, but I think you get like Darkling Coven and Shadow Blades as the other options.
You give up a couple of things, but you've got some list diversity, so you want to like. Either way, a lot of different city rules. Without going into all of the rules, because I think we'll be here for 10 years. Yeah. Are there any particular cities that you think play well to the meta right now?
I think the biggest ones to the meta right now are Hallowheart, Tempest, Anvil Guard, or Misthaven, which is kind of the take on Anvil Guard, only because of the artifacts that it gets. But I think that we've kind of fallen away from the Phoenicium piece because of bounty hunters and not being able to take as many of the Phoenix Guard as we were able to do before. And then Hammerhole, unfortunately, they got a lot of cool stuff. But like you said, the deployments get real weird on some of those missions. And it's hard to get into your opponent's territory to maximize that. And so I have 6, or I get 6 extra command points from my banners, right? There's only so much I can do in a turn with the stuff that I have. So Honored Retinue didn't really come up much. It's usually one of those things you remember when you're like, oh, crap. I need to not let this guy die. Stormkeep's the most important rule of cities, making it function at a competitive level. Adjutant is nice, but you're going to get 2 command points out of it for the game, probably on average. Amplified Sorcery. If you're playing Purple Sun, like if you're playing hard into the endless spells, yeah, absolutely. That's going to take you over the edge.
All right, lots to unpack here. First off, I agree with your perspective on the cities. Hammerhole is one that I flirt with a lot, but unfortunately, it's not the one that I want to marry. Just because it allows you to have, if you're in opponent's territory, wholly within opponent's territory, it allows you to fight with a command point. You can fight for a second time, which is really cool. Imagine getting a bunch of dragons or fulminators or a frigate general on Griffin or a prime or like whatever your combat monster is in your list. Having it fight for a second time can be potent. I mentioned Krondus and Karazai, but some of the deployment zones are so restrictive at the moment. They're so small or they're so janky. It is hard to get into wholly within their territory.
Yeah.
And that is really your one big synergy piece. So for me, Hammerhole is a bit hard to do. Probably not. I don't want to put all my chips on the table. Tempest Eye, the +3 to move and +1 just to save in the first turn is awesome. Hallow Heart. I'm curious, Nick. We know Lumineth and we know Tzeentch are coming pretty soon. They're coming real soon.
Yeah.
Do you think the value of Hallow Heart being the magic city, getting boost to having more spell laws, having more boost to casts, do you think, and some magic resistance too?
Yeah.
Do you think that will become more important with the emergence of a magic domination of Tzeentch, Lumineth, and Seraphon? Seraphon's been doing really well. And Nighthorn is doing really well, and you need those mortal wounds. There's not a lot of mortals in cities.
True.
Do you think maybe Hallow Heart is like the rising champion for this emerging meta?
Oh, absolutely. That was the deciding factor between was I going Hallow Heart or was I going Tempest Eye at Nova? Because those are the two that will give you the top end performance kind of results based on cities when you're looking at the capabilities that are in there. But the magic resist was the biggest thing I thought Hallow Heart had, that ability to ignore these heavy magic casting armies. Just on a 5-up or on a 4-up, if you're using the Crystal Aegis. The extra casting and everything, a lot of people have dispels, a lot of people have that. But you're trying to get that 18-inch bubble or that 18-inch zone control where then you just start unloading those mortal wounds. Like if you can establish that, Hallow Heart turn 2, you're going to figure out who wins the game right there. Like after that second magic phase, when everybody's in and you've got that turn 2, that's pretty much where those goes. If you're trying to do cute things like we used to do, which was like Bridge of Soulscream Bridge and bringing a bunch of people along so you get the high casting. I think armies are set up to kind of avoid that screen out, that deployments don't really fit those type of things anymore. And so I think just Hallow Heart having that as the passive, that magic resist, and then also having the ability to just dump mortal wounds at 18 inches is really where you want to be with that. And then that's why I think you'll see a rise in them. But also if we start seeing more auto dispels or you're feeding into Tzeentch, if Tzeentch gets up there, right, you don't want to start giving them, pink horrors and other screens of blue horrors and just constant. That gets very difficult to get people off objectives.
I was talking to Tom as well, Tom Guan, who went 5-0 with Hallow Heart, and I'm trying to work out his list. I had a rough feeling of what he was trying to do because the linchpin of his army was a battle mage on Griffin along with the Kronspine.
Yep.
And the combination there is that the battle mage on Griffin gets +1 to cast, which is awesome. But the spell he really wanted to cast was Warding Brand.
Yes.
So if he casts Warding Brand, and if anyone who doesn't know who Warding Brand is, you pick one unit of yours, and basically every time the model takes damage and it's not negated on a 4-up, the attacking unit in melee takes 1 mortal wound. So if you pop that onto the Kronspine, who is already taking a lot of damage and is fast getting into melee, and it's bouncing back mortal wounds in addition to the damage, it's beautiful. But if you don't want to use a Kronspine, that's fine. Put it on a bunch of dragons. Put it on a Free Guild General and Griffin. What I used to do is I would put it on a Phoenix Guard. So if they're trying to protect my Hurricane or my Luminarch and they get into for combat, I'm super tanky and I'm doing damage on the way out.
Yeah, I agree. I actually ran that for 2 weeks in a row at different RTTs. Ended up 2-1 on both of them. with that exact same combo. That idea of the Crownspine takes infinite damage, i.e., there's no cap to the amount, and you just can throw it into. I think the biggest thing that I was beating was the Iron Jaws. Right? They want to fight. You're like, fight, please. Like, I will just take it. You rend too, please, more rend. Like, I want you to do as much damage to the Crownspine because you will have nothing left in your army when it's done. Because you're just going to deal that damage back.
Plus, you've got things like ignite weapons for the +1 to wound. You've got, elemental cyclone. You pop it through an umbral spell portal. Like, there's so many great little combinations of synergies, which is again kind of why I think some of those cities really work. But I think you made a good comment. I know a good mate of mine, Austin, loves Misthaven. There's a lot of movement synergy in Misthaven, some deep striking, and it does build you towards more of a dark elf with the Darkling Coven and the Drakespawn type builds. But there's a lot of good. It depends on your flavor and depends on your play style. And I think again, whether you want to be offensive, defensive, magic, shooting, whatever you want, there's something for you in cities.
Absolutely.
Question I wanted to ask you though, about because you kind of rushed through some of the rules. I just want to get some clarity on some of these things. The adjutant rule. So basically, on a 4-up, you can get an extra command if your general has a wound characteristic of 6 or less, and you got a supporting hero very similar. Would you take 2 foot heroes, make 1 general for the sake of getting the adjutant rule, or is that just a nice to have if that's how you build your list?
An absolute nice to have. I wanted the Rune Lord, and I knew that I wanted the Rune Lord to be the general. And so if I'm doing that, and I know I want another hero, which was Deloria, I was like, okay, cool. These two want to stand next to each other. The command trait giving a +1 to wound makes it so Deloria's hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s if she doesn't move. Right? That's huge. And so the nicety was the couple times when I'd get the extra command point out of it. So you roll for your command point for your heroic action, and then you roll for your command point for your adjutant. So 75% of the time you're getting an extra command point to use on your turn, which is nice. But like, there's times I also sent the Rune Lord to go do his own thing because Deloria was in a great position to keep shooting, and I didn't want to move her.
It means you've got to have 2 heroes within 3 inches of each other. I give it up a lot. I actually avoid it because sometimes I'll want, like, for example, when I've done some of my Tempest eye lists in the past have been based around the Dreadlord on Black Dragon and Drakespawn Knights. I want a hero that is more than 6 wounds, or my Free Guild General on Griffin is the general. So it depends on who it is. I will give it away. A 4-up is not that great. I guess it depends on the build. I more want to think, like, is it worth tweaking a list around it?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Which then kind of leads into the same thing, right? The honored retinue. If you want to kind of help protect and ward your 6 wound general, and you have it next to a bodyguard, awesome. It can bounce wounds back. So if you're running, I don't know, a sorceress on foot, and you've already got those idiots that you want to stab for the +2 to casting, well, this is already native. Like, you've already got it. But if you're going to build your army around a Rune Lord, you're probably already hanging around, Iron Drakes or some type of foot troop.
Yeah, and I think this really comes in specifically, I think, the Tzeentch matchup, where they do 6 mortal wounds through the portal and just go, okay, I'll kill your hero. You're like, no, you won't. Right? Because that 4-up's going to give you that ability to survive on 2 wounds remaining or something like that if math all comes out. Right? And so that's kind of a nicety of it. But really, other than that matchup, you're just not only going to use it when it's available. Like, it's like, oh, and you got to remember the rule for it.
I never forgot it, but it's a nice to have. It's a nice to have because I used to use a lot of, my general used to be the Free Guild Guard on foot, because I always want to use. I always want to use his command to get the boost to the shooters and stuff. Is there any particular endless spells you think that work well with cities? I know when I played Hallowheart with my Phoenix Guard, I'd love Emerald Life Swarm. It no longer double taps now. I still think it's valuable because of that, because they're just so durable. But is there any particular endless spells that you like in cities?
I I played lots of different endless spells as I was trying them out. Obviously, the Purple Sun is king, right? Like, it just with what it does in a competitive environment, you either have to make a reasonable choice to say I'm going into the Purple Sun or I'm not going to the Purple Sun, and you have to have a good reason, one way or the other, on doing that. So, barring the Purple Sun, I think Ravenax Gnashing Jaws works really well. Very comes out easy. You've got it. You can dispel it and cast it again. Lots of different actions, but it's passive damage. Things that do passive damage for your army, because you're not going to maximize the same amount of damage as another army is going to do, right? But you're going to get all these little chip damages, these passive damages piece. I think I would like to do more with the Geminids. The ability to stop redeploy is super important. But I think because it stops at the combat phase and says, that's really where I want it. That's really where I want it to stop that. Because you're trying to stop redeploy and you're trying to stop all-out defense. And you can stop all-out defense in the shooting, so it does the same thing as kind of the Purple Sun with the -1 rend, but on a cheaper level, I could say. But at the same time, like, is that 40 points worth it? Is that 40 points better used somewhere else?
I think as well. I think a couple of the other ones I really like is Horrorghast. Because that's what I really want Geminids to do. Is I won't be able to stop inspiring presence. And if I've got a unit of, I don't know, 40 crossbowmen, or if I've done a whole bunch of damage, we do struggle for damage. And Purple Sun's going to be great to give your, I don't know, your handgunners Rend 2 or your crossbow with, the double shots, Rend 1. It's very good. But Horrorghast can then help reduce those elite units that, we struggle to kind of, kill them. And, you've got, eye for an eye or something. The other one I was going to talk about was Quicksilver Swords. I really enjoy Quicksilver Swords because we need the mortals, and I can't rely on the Hurricanum to do it. So it's a nice way to do that.
Yeah, I think those are both options for what you're doing. And I think as you were talking, the Horrorghast gives you something else that we struggle with, is the ability to stop. Yeah, and the ability to stop rally. Right, rally hurts us a lot. I lost the before to Bone Splitters, just rallying all the time. The what's it called? Daughters of Cain. Rallying up on 4s is just like too much. But if they had not been able to use the inspiring presence for the 8 ones I killed before, they would have all gone away, and I would not have had to worry about it. So I think Horrorghast does give that option for shooting heavy armies to be able to stop getting rallied on.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, there's a couple of look. Either way, like whatever your flavor is, I think there's some good uses of amplified sorcery, and there's some good ways to get pluses to cast as well. So not only do you have things like Hurricanum that can give +1 to casting, or the Luminarch for +1 to unbinding, you've also got the amplified sorcery. Really quickly, is there any Stormcast units that you really like or are worth considering adding in from a coalition point of view? Again, they're not allies. They're coalition. So it means they can't be the general. They don't count as your battle line, but they are essentially a part of your force. And different cities here also double down on this. And as Nick's already alluded to, Tempest Eye lets us do 1 in 4 Kharadron Overlords. Living City does 1 in 4 Sylvaneth. It means I could bring in Alariel, even though she's much more than my ally pool. I could bring Alariel or Durthu or whatever it might be into my living cities. I could bring in a big boat from Tempest Eye. But back to Stormkeep, anything in particular that you really like? Would you bring in like the Knight Incantor?
I think so. I think there's definitely spots where a Knight Incantor, like if you're not going into the Rune Lord aspect, like Knight Incantor flips that and says, okay, I give you the thing that stops the one thing that's going to kill you. Against Tzeentch, it's the portal, right? If they can't portal to you, you've got a lot of options to then start shooting them back. But also, like, obviously the Fulminators still rock, right? You need something to go out and punch somebody in the face. That's what Fulminators does. But if you're not going to put units that are going to take a hit, I think Protectors gives a lot because that extra save, even in Tempest Eye, they move a little faster. That's something that I was deciding on between that and Palladors, right? With the ability to teleport. or the ability to like create a front line that just does not move. And so, you can get these types of units that are doing that. I think another one that could be really helpful if you're going into a shooting piece and don't want to take Deloria, you can take the Knight Judicator, right? You've got 6 damage at range. You've got some screens with the couple of dogs, but do you want to spend the 200 points versus the 115? Like it kind of checks out on like, all right, where do I want to be with my list?
Not with Nighthorn at the moment. This is an argument that I've been playing with at the moment because I've been playing Stormcast lately. The model that I'm obsessed with at the moment is the Celestin Prime. And the reason I love him as well is he's self-sufficient. He has a 4-up ward that has nothing to do with your faction. He can deep strike, nothing to do with your faction. He can do mortal wounds from his bomb. He can guarantee charges. He can do a whole bunch of damage. So he's a great 300 odd point hero that I think that's probably one thing that we lack is a tanky. Well, I wouldn't call him tanky. I mean, the 4-up ward
assassin, something, a really strong assassin that's reliable, can take out other heroes, even monstrous heroes. I think that's something that he does very, very well. And I think you see that in the Seraphon lists and why they take him, because they lack that as well. And they go, okay, I'm going to need something that does it.
Because we lack speed and we lack a killy hero. Our best killy hero internally would be the Free Guild General on Griffin. And I say that that's our best killy hero. Internally, the best killy hero. And I'd say he's like a bit of a fluff piece at best.
Yeah.
Our best deep striking, I mean, outside of Allegiance is the Shadow Warriors. They're not guaranteed damage. So I've used Prime to come down and desecrate their land.
Yeah.
I've used it to eye for an eye. I've used it for so many different battle tactics. And I think it's a great piece. But I think, this is where we're very generous with what we can bring into our army and fill the gaps or strengthen our strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. Stormkeep gives you the ability to get away from your I would say the things that you're going to cause you to lose, right? You're like, I can't beat this. Well, Stormcast can beat this and this piece, so we'll bring that piece in. And it also gives you more list freedom once you decide on what parts you're going to shore up with Stormkeeps.
One thing that got added to us in the White Dwarf, there's a couple of things we got from a White Dwarf update that people may or may not have seen. One is we've got a couple of mount traits. It's so good we finally got some mount traits. Unfortunately, it only really helps 50% of our faction. So in my opinion, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, I love the Soaring Guardian rule. So for your general on Griffin or your battle mage on Griffin, the mount trait is basically on a 2-up. When it dies for the first time, it's not died. It heals D3 wounds, and you can put it anywhere on the board outside of 9 of your enemies. So it means that you can cap an objective. You can get out of that squishy combat that wasn't going your way. You can get it out of harm's way. And if you've got some type of healing, there's a couple of cities that have like a D6 heal. You can heal that back up in your next hero phase. I love this. While the Black Dragon gets to do its mortal wounds on a 5-up instead of a 6. Where are you at?
I think on Fetid Breath, I think we both agree. I think with the way that you kind of said it, it's a 6-inch attack, right? Okay. But the Soaring Guardian, and I think that's the reason that the Battle Mage in Hallowheart is so good. You don't want to. You have to take damage to your heroes to get that bonus cast. So your mage is usually going to be about half dead all the time, right? And so it's going to get just shot off, right? But at the same time, you're like, okay, let me reposition. And I won games against Sylvaneth that way. Is like they run up, they shoot everything into it. A 2-up, okay, I'm back here. All right. Eventually, your heroic leadership, all these other pieces, you get yourself back up. But they put themselves so bad in position to try to kill that then you're just able to maximize the follow-up. And so I think Soaring Guardian makes these playable. Like, I don't think you play them, either one of them, without Soaring Guardian. You can get some good saves on the Griffin mount, so you can throw them into a pile. You can do a few wounds. Eventually, they're going to bring something else in there to kill them. When that happens, you teleport to the other side of the board to prep yourself to kill these smaller units. So I think these were huge, and I would love to see them expanded kind of in a new thing to, like you have Soaring Guardian or you have something else, right? You have Fetid Breath or something else.
Well, there was no Phoenix mount. That kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
So the Anointed on the Flame or the Frost, neither of those types of mounts get a mount trait, which really surprised me.
Yeah, those are some of the most popular ones to be used. And it seems like there's enough lore piece out there that you could easily make one for a Phoenix, one way or the other.
Ooh, interesting question. So, bringing this up from Twitch. So, why is the Battle Mage on Griffin a good pick when it's so brittle?
Oh, this is actually one of the, I think, the coolest parts about having it in the Hallow Heart is it goes up to a 2 caster, right? It has a natural +1 because you're in Gur right now, and it moves, I think, 15 inches, something like that. Right? Something like that, 15 inches. But its spell is +2 run, +2 charge. So when you give it to a Kronspine, that thing's going.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's the Battle Mage on foot. The Battle Mage on Griffin has a line of sight. I'm going to quickly check it, but the Battle Mage on Griffin has a line of sight damage per pew.
Yeah, check it. Because he does have Amber Spear.
Does it have?
I think he also has the other one.
I don't think he does. I'm going to check it. If you do, that's hot. Oh my god, you're right. You are right. Holy shite. That's hot.
So he does what the foot one does, but he also has the mortal wound range. Yes, he's brittle, but the Soaring Guardian covers that up, right? I was playing against Skaven, and they hit me for like 13 mortal wounds or whatever it is with 12 mortal wounds with the cannon, the Warfire cannon. I was like, oh god, and then he kills it, and then I just 2+ move it to the other side of the board, and then it's like still there doing its job. So like you can use it also to kill other things that have 5 models, 10 models of 5-up save type of thing. Those little 1 wound guys, like you can bully things with it for that, but you're never going to put this against another hero. And they're always going to try to put their hero against it. So it gives you a chance to kind of control the flow of like where different pieces are going. And when I was binding it to the Kronspine, that makes it that if they want to come for my hero, they also have to fight a Kronspine. And nobody wants to do that. Right? That's not fun at all. But I think the brittleness of it is okay because it's also 260 points, right?
255. And I think you need to put it into context, right? It is a wizard, not a combat monster, right? So if you think it is your Archaon, your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, it's not that type of run up the board and hit the chaff and go for the good stuff. Yeah, it's a 5-up save, but it's 13 wounds for 250 points, a fast moving mage that has 2 native spells and actually can hit in combat. It's got some decent combat. I mean, they're only Rend 1 attacks, but it's got some good attack profiles for a wizard.
Yes.
And, and I think if you're looking for that type of mobility, 255 is pretty generous in cities. But yeah, if I compare it to a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon or some type of other monster hero or a monster caster, yeah, but it's not that meant to be that.
Yeah, agree. I think that's once you kind of put that mentality to it, then you use it as a bully for small units. It moves 16 inches, so you go, that unit that's holding the objective on that side of the board is not safe, right? You can get over there and get it. And then you're out moving the other type of units that want to come fight it, the other 12-inch movers, who now have to go through not only your screens that you set up, but your Kronspine or your other damage dealing people, or your shooting, right? You want to get close enough. There's a 16-inch range of bubble that most of the army has for shooting.
Yeah. Plus, like if in Tempest Die, it's a great Aura of Glory. In Living City and Tempest Die, they've both got a D6 heal. Which, I think one thing that I had a problem with when I played Hallow Heart is the Hurricanum, which is a great caster, is slow. and it can
Yes.
get clogged and can get clogged up in the board pretty easily by just with the troops and the base size. But the battle mage on Griffin does have some flexibility around the side, so I don't want to get too much. I think we kind of went way over, but I think it's a good argument on the battle mage on Griffin. I think it goes back to, this is one that I would reconsider because it hasn't seen a lot of play in my time. But I think now is a good time to reconsider, especially if you're thinking the Kronspine.
Agree.
We have one battle tactic. Do you find battle tactic? This is a grand strategy. Do you use this particular grand strategy where if you have three, if your opponent has set up any faction terrain, it counts as three, or you score this one if you control more terrain features than your opponent. If your opponent has set up any faction terrain, then they count as 3 terrain instead of 1 when determining. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to control more terrain than my opponent. And if I can control faction terrain or they control faction terrain, it counts as 3. So it can swing either way.
Yeah, I don't think we take this in anything that we're doing, right? One, it's a bookkeeper's nightmare, trying to remember who has control of which piece of terrain and who had it last. That sucks. Trying to remember all of that. And then like you got to be within 3 to control terrain, but you also want to be moving to objectives and, you know, all this other piece. But a lot of armies are going to have, I know with Ideneth and others are like protect the, you know, their faction terrain as their grand strategy. You want to choose where you're going to fight these battles. You don't want to be forced into their castle to try to get your grand strategy, because those 3 points at the end of the game are going to be, if you're winning, you know, great. You're like, oh, I didn't get those 3 points. But in the grand scheme of a 5-round tournament, those 3 points are going to start adding up, where it's going to be the difference between, you know, top 8, top 16. You know, like that's where those are going to start coming in.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this one. Like, I look at it and it's just more bookkeeping. And if I play to a faster army, yeah, okay, that's not a problem. I think, you know, again, if I do Tempest Die with Pistoliers, you know, and fast things, and I can be tagging terrain as I get into combat, sure. But if I'm going with a lot of foot troops, I don't like it. I don't like it. Quick question from the chat while we're here. With Dawnbringer Crusade coming out, which we don't know when it's going to come out, that's, I guess, the evolution of Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah.
Is there any, and obviously, you know, Warcom has just shown us some new sculpts. Is there any units that you would like to see to have new sculpts, or any updates that you would like to see from Dawnbringers?
I would love to see monstrous hero centerpiece.
Yeah.
Something really cool that does it. And I think every army's kind of getting one. It's flashy. And so I'd love to have something that I can just be like, yes, that's a celestial griffin or whatever it's going to be, right? You know, like something that evolves that sculpt into something that's a centerpiece. Also some more dynamic posing, I think, of the baseline of troops, right? You get 2 poses and you just rotate between those with what you got on most of the line troops. I think some more dynamic posing would be pretty fun.
This is a perfect segue for two birds, one stone. I want to see the return of the War Altar of Sigmar, because one of the 2 battle tactics requires flagellants, and flagellants have no internal synergy at all since they removed the witch hunters, they removed the warrior priests, and they removed the alternative sculpts. So the Hurricanum Luminarch and the War Altar all dropped at the same time, yet the poor old War Altar got dropped. So I'd love to see Volkmar the Grim in some return, because that really inspires me. I love flagellants. I have 140 of them. I want to run something more synergistic to the crazy religious fanatics that is the flagellants. But you got 2 new battle tactics. I think we both agree that the Sanctify is hot garbage.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah.
Why do you think it's hot garbage?
I just like you're okay. So you pick a friendly unit of flagellants, right? They got to be 6 and outside of your territory, right? So you got to get in your opponent's territory for it. And then if they're still there, like what? They're going to die to somebody looking at them funny, right? The whole point of their mechanic is to die, flee, and run them over with mortal wounds. Like, you're not going to be there at the end. And so, like, it's almost the battle tactic is counter to what the unit wants to be doing in the first place. And I don't think I ever want to use something where I'm like, I'm going to bet my 2 points on this turn on this thing happening.
I've scored this once or twice because I love flagellants and I wanted to practice with them. And I was trying to see, what the pros and cons were with flagellants outside of any eternal synergy, right? They've got a better bravery, but a worse save. I think they're the same price as free guild guard on foot.
Yep.
So I could get, I think they got a better movement as well. I think they might have an extra +1 to their movement. So it gave me a bit more speed and they were like a nice little screen and a nice little bump. But I chose not to charge with them in the turn that I try to get Sanctify. So I moved them up the board. I think I ran them to get from outside to inside. Then obviously didn't get into combat. And obviously if I won the priority, I can get them into combat. If I lost it, who cares? They die.
Yeah.
But was it enough for me to put a flagellant unit in my list? Probably not. However, depending on your type of build, if you are running not free guild, I can't remember the conditions of flagellants being battle line.
Human.
If you can avoid, if you have a general that's not human, maybe flagellants are okay. Maybe because they're not GVs, they could be a decent screen. Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, there's potential for them actually to be used effectively in Phoenicium, where you want things to die, and you're like, go die, because my other units are going to be way better now.
I did that. I did that exactly that. I did that with Aether Wings as well. So my Aether Wings and my flagellants were the things that were just there to die. And then obviously the rest of the points were in Phoenix type things. So how would I, another question from the chat, I think is an interesting one. Then we'll get to Banners Held High, is how would I run an all steam tank army? Look, honestly, I wouldn't at the moment. Not like from a competitive point of view, steam tanks, they're not monsters, so they're only counting as 2 on an objective.
Yeah.
Well, they're here, like they don't count very much. They're a little bit unreliable for me. If they were monsters, maybe, but I don't know. They're a bit restrictive for me. I wouldn't do an all steam tank list, but if I did, it'd probably be in Tempest Eye.
I think I would do mine in Hallowheart. I think giving the leader the arcane tome, make him a wizard. So then you can have something to cast. So you take damage and then you steam tank heal yourself, right? So you're like getting that back. You get some good spells out of it. And, you could take a Lord Arcanum? No, not Arcanum. The one that does the plus to war machines. Because I think they might still be war machines.
Yeah.
Or
yeah, they are. Yeah. They're still war machines.
So now you're hitting on, 3s, I think it is, right? It's still a cannon, right? You're all in on the casino. You're like, are my D6s going to go hot, and am I going to kill all the heroes on my shots? Or like cannonballs in all games on versions of Age of Sigmar and Fantasy, right? Is it the 4-up is enough, right? That's rolling that single shot is hard sometimes.
I'd at least want the Hurricanum as well. I think that's another little, just the +1 aura around. But what Banners Held High, is this one that I really like this one.
I think this one's awesome. I use this multiple times. This is one of the ones that when you're in position in the game and you're naturally, the game state has moved to get to multiple objectives, be in different places. A lot of the times when the things let you, move your models into there, you already have your Galician vets, or you have your battle line units there. They have banners, and you don't want to use the desecrate this turn. You don't want to use outmuscle or whatever one, because you know that like you're going to get those later. Taking one that you can have, that you guarantee it, is fantastic to be able to just have that flexibility.
I was just freaking out for a second. I was just in my head. I'm like, wait a second. Are objectives outside of 12 inches? I'm like, yes. Normally they're 15. I was thinking about the measurements,
Yep.
like 11 by 15.
15.
I'm like,
Yep.
no, I was just thinking for a second, like the reversed order. I'm like, holy shit, all
Oh.
the objectives are 11. You can't even do that. No, you absolutely can, because they're normally 15. But yeah, this is a really good one. Most of your people do have banners. So if the condition is there, absolutely call this one out. I absolutely love this one. But yeah, it's good to have an extra battle tactic. And not only that, we also got an extra unit recently, and we're about to get into the list in a second, folks, if you're wanting to hear what Nick has to say. But this is all about setting up for how to build out. Because I think one thing that we both agree on is that this is not about just taking Nick's list and running it. This is the one single way to run cities. We've just talked literally for an hour, scratching the surface
Yeah.
on how to build out cities. And there's so many varieties, from the folks in the chat asking about all Steep Tank lists to all magical supremacy, magical denial, horde shooting, melee, whatever. Lots of cool stuff. Mist Harvin is one that it probably, I think, needs to see more play. But the Hexbane Hunters is a brand new Warcry warband that came out, in the last month?
Yeah.
And when I saw these rules for the 180 odd points, I was chef kiss, and I went to my local game store looking for them, and they had sold out already.
Yep.
I love this. What are your thoughts? Rules are on the screen. You get a hero, you get a couple of troops, but more importantly, you get some doggos. A lot of cool things on there. You've got a ward save of 5 up for both the hero and the troops. You get a combination of melee and missile weapons. You've got a couple of interesting rules, some bonus to damage if you attack certain things. There's a whole bunch of rules, right? You can read it on the screen. But
Yeah.
what's your perspective?
I think this is an excellent direction for where cities could be going with the Dawnbringer Crusade, and giving them something that gives them an identity. This is super cool. And I think if I would have been able to get this a little earlier, I may have tested these and this may have made the list, right? Because what this does, one, the ward save, huge. That's something that changes the math a ton. It changes like what type of units can fight each other. When you're dropped in on and somebody sends, whatever number of plague flies at you, you're going to lose any city's unit that isn't, a Phoenix Guard, right? It's just going to happen. But having these other options where it's like, okay, I also have this, or you can take these and you can just kind of move them up to skirmish with other units of the equivalent size, and you should win those skirmishes. Most of the time, City's not going to win those skirmishes, right? When you take your Dark Shards or your, whatever it is, against another equivalent pointed unit, what are they called? The Stormcast new version of them, the ones with the stabbies, the shield and the spear.
The Vindictors?
Yeah, like that would be like the level tier, the status quo of what skirmishing kind of units would be like. This can go head to head with that, right? We don't have that in anything else. So I think I'm really excited to see the direction this is going, the ability to do ranged and the ability to do melee. It plays well off the hero, right? As you say, you pick something and then you get bonus damage against that when you're using these weapons. Like there's a lot to be excited about with this.
Great screen, plays well into the meta. Like there's a bunch of bonus damage to death, demons, and wizards, all very prevalent in the meta right now. And in fact, with again Seraphon and not the Seraphon, Lumineth and Zench coming around as well. I was just looking on my phone to see, because back in the day, they've changed it. Unfortunately, Seraphon used to have the demon keyword.
Yes,
like,
they used to. Yes.
I was having a look really quickly to see if they still had it. They don't anymore. I'm like, yeah, because Seraphon's doing well at the moment as well. So, and just to call a comment really quickly on the Incarnate from Matt, I think it's a really good one as well. The Incarnate, when it dies, just to go back, and we'll talk about in your list, when the Incarnate, when it dies, it actually doesn't get worse. It actually gets quite good.
Way better.
So you can pair it with like a small wizard like the Sorceress on foot, and if she dies, cool, it goes wild. And I've actually seen people purposely kill that bounded hero in turn 1 just to get a wild run and charge type Incarnate. It doesn't need to be given all that attack because it gets it natively. It's just so good. So yeah, but anyway, Hexbane, great addition. I I will add it to my list. I think it's a definitely one. Normally, Underworld's a hit and miss. This is a hit.
Hit, absolutely a hit.
Yeah, there's like half of them are like I would never. They're cool alternative sculpts, but this is a hit. But speaking of hits, is Tempest Eye, which is what you ran. And before I show the list, I want to kind of get into your head. Like, what is it that you were trying to do, right? So you've got a bunch of rules. You've got 3 different rules. In turn 1, you get to add +3 to movement for Tempest Eye units and +1 to save in both of the turns in turn 1. You get to add +1 to your run rolls for Tempest Eye units. You also can get 1 in every 4 to be KO. And then there's a command ability that in the shooting phase, you can shoot and run.
Yep. Yeah, so I think when I was looking at which city I wanted to run, I started with the event pack. Like, what was the missions I was going to have to get after? And so I was deciding between Hallowheart and Tempest Eye. When I saw the amount of objectives, 6 objectives on 2 of the missions, 8 objectives on 1, I said, I need mobility. I need things that can move. And so that's kind of where I leaned heavily into Tempest Eye and said, okay, I need to make sure that I have that ability to get across the board. I have the ability to absorb an alpha strike, which would be Iron Jaws or others. And then that shooting piece of it, which is inherently built into it with the command traits and the rapid redeploy, gives you your own little alpha strike back when you're almost always going to be given the first turn, right? If you take Battle Regiment, maybe not so much. I felt Augsburg Conquerors was a little more important for the event and maybe more important overall for cities, but I think that's up to debate on list building. But in doing so, having something that could be given the first turn and still be able to do something with it. And I think that's where I settled on Tempest Eye.
Yeah, I really like the defensive play because the alert and forewarned, getting the +3 to movement, it means your standard foot troops, which are what, base 5? If you're Dewardin, it's base 4.
4.
Now they're moving 7. That's 7 without a run roll. So to be able to get board presence, get onto an objective, if you don't take Battle Regiment and get given turn 1, you can really position yourself well on an objective. But if someone does take the first turn before you put any of your buffs on, well, beautiful, you've got +1 to your save and you can absorb a lot more damage, right? Let alone put in all-out defense and anything else,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That's what I love. I love it. Or if I get turn 1, I can move forward, and then if they do charge me, I still get +1 to my save.
Yeah, that was an incredibly important part on certain missions, is that they'd give you that first turn and they were not aware that you were about to move 14 inches on them. Like these little dwarfs, just, 4-inch move, 3-inch bonus. If you give them the 6-inch on the thing, or they roll the run, right? All of the units have a +1 naturally, right? With their musician, then you get another +1, right? You're adding
Battle
5.
Mage.
Yeah, like you're adding 5 inches flat to your run before you even calculate the run and the unit's movement. And so just getting up on those objectives, standing there and saying, okay, come fight me, or getting up there and saying, do you want to come fight me? I have a screen, plus behind them is a set of Iron Drakes who are about to unleash hell on you, which happened a couple times in the Stormcast match, which helped me beat dragons. Sure, you charge my unit, you're going to shred that unit, but you're going to take an unleash hell from the unit behind it on that first turn.
Yeah, I dig that. And, like there's so many other cool things, right? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the foot troop idiots with like Outriders of the Realm, their musicians already give them like a +1 to run roll.
Yes.
So in Tempest Eye, you're +2 to your run.
Yep.
Obviously, you can't use the command forward to, you can't use the command because you don't get the pluses to that. It's either flat 6 or it's 2+ dice roll, which is quite generous and keeps a CP up your sleeve, because rapid redeploy is a really good one, especially if your shooting unit is maybe doing mortal wounds. You don't care about needing all-out attack. Yep. I know I really like using all-out attack on my Pistoliers, but even then, I think they can already run and shoot anyway. Or there's something with anyway.
Yeah. Pistoliers, is it run and shoot, or the other ones are run and shoot? One's run and Charge and
One's
shoot
retreat
the
and
others.
yeah,
Yeah.
retreat and shoot. With your KO, do you bring encouragement overlords, and are there anything in particular you really like? I know for me, I really liked gun haulers, or I would take, because gun haulers gave me that. You talk shadow warriors and being able to like come in from reserve. I found gun haulers in Tempest were exact same. It was a bit more durable. I obviously had a better armor save, and I could also bring in the balloon boys, the what are they called? Engine riggers.
Sky Warden or engine riggers.
Yeah, Sky Wardens and engine riggers. I could hitch a ride with those engine riggers on a boat, so that I would drop from the sky. I'd have my gun hauler, and then I would also have a couple of bodies that hitched a ride on the gun hauler to be going for objectives, charging in. That's how I was using KO, but I've also seen people using the big boats. Anyway, do you like KO? Would you bring them in, or is it diluting your army a little bit too much?
I found that KO was essential for the army for the way that I was playing it, but I think that there's a argument on not having KO in the list as well. I wanted to, as you talked about, the Shadow Warrior aspect, the ability to teleport around the board, and then bring some Sky Wardens with me. I helped me get multiple objectives multiple times, right? You put one unit that counts as 2 over there, and then you bring 6 along with you. So now you're, 8 to their 5, which usually if they put a monster or a hero or something like that, or you a 10-man unit, and you shoot the other ones that are on there, right? You steal objectives a lot of the times with that, or other times because of the Tempest huge movement. Say you can't, they screened you out, so you can't get in behind them. A gun hauler gets a +6 movement at any time. It's going 12. It's going 3 more. You're running. That thing can go 24 inches across the board. You're just like, and you're there. There's just nowhere to be. Like, if you really have to get there, you can get on an objective, or you just go stand in front of somebody at a choke point and say, okay, you got to kill this 10 wounds with all these save, a 3-up save, and then you give it or a 4-up save, go into a 3-up, and then you can give it all out defense if you want to. And then when it's all done, it doesn't degrade, so you can always fly high out.
I always used it to pull my opponent apart. So I would put like a deep strike on either of the flanks, and it's hard to screen out one gun hauler. And then I'm shooting off screens, or I'm going for like that the buff hero, and I'm just spraying at them and annoying them, right? So it's like, do I go and handle that? Do I come for this main force, or I'm clearing off the screens in preparation for my force to charge with its +3 to move? So I do think there's some good stuff in KO that you can tap into. A couple of quick ones. Do you have a favorite command trait?
Hawkeye, fantastic. +1 to wound on all missile weapons for a 12-inch bubble. That's huge. I think if I went free guild Griffin, I would take Swift as the Wind. But I think Hawkeye is the one that you build your list around.
I love all 3, actually. I've used Swift with the Wind with like a combat-y Dreadlord on Black Dragon, so it can run and charge. I've used the Aether Guard Captain to, if I've got something that I want to charge, so other things that want to charge, I can get that +1, so I can't fail a 3-incher, which is always helpful. But yeah, Hawkeye is probably the one I go to the most, especially because I'm building through shooter units.
Yep.
Favorite artifact?
Arcane Tome. It's not on this list.
Right? All right. Outside of that,
Patrician's Helm. The ability to stop battle shock, right? It saves you a command point. So Seer Stone Amulet gives you a command point, but if you're just going to use that command point for Inspiring Present, just take Patrician's Helm.
I've used a Zephyrite banner a few times, and again, if I'm going the Aether Guard Captain along with Zephyrite banner, that kind of is a guarantee that I hit those charges, especially if I'm trying to hit multiple charges at the same time.
Yep.
And then favorite spell of the spell lore?
Strike of Eagles at a ranged character. I killed off, the 2 times it got through for casting. One of them was 5 wounds, the other was 6. I was like, well, Dice, I guess you've been waiting all day to cast this. But most of the times you're getting a 3 damage, 3 mortal wounds at range if you can cast it. Aura of Glory, fantastic if you're in that charge list, though. That's huge for charge lists.
Yeah, Aura of Glory is my number one. I talked about the Battle Mage on Griffin being that beacon of like getting +1 attack. I've used it on like my dragons. Like I've used Stormcast dragons to get that +1 attack going for the charge with Ren 2 damage to brilliant because they get the keyword of Tempest Eye. Celestial Visions is nice if I've got like spillover spells that I want to choose, but you're right. Like Aura of Glory, Strike of Eagles are probably the two ones that I really like.
Great.
Which gets into your first list, which then goes into, this is your Nova list, right? So you got Tempest Eye, Shadow of Show of Dominance. What Shadow Warrior talk? Show of Dominance. You've got a Rune Lord, which you've completely stacked is a General, Hawkeye, Arcane Tome, Strike of Eagles, and you've got the heal spell followed by Derilia, our little wizard sniping crossbow. We've got 10 Longbeards. You've got 20 Iron Drakes, 10 Dark Shards. You got your Gun Hauler, 6 Sky Wardens, 2 Fulminators, 3 Paladors, and a Kronspine. The irony of it all is that when you look at Cities of Sigmar, when you got 1 in every 4 is Stormcast, 1 every 4 is KO, it can really be just 2 out of 4 is Cities.
Yeah, and I think that's where Cities does something really well in this list, and that's shoot, right? And that's where the Iron Drake perform the screens, move the stuff, right? And then so the Stormcast are doing the melee damage. They're doing the bounty hunting piece. And then the Gunthauler Sky Wardens, they're doing the harassment, right? They're all doing a different piece of this list that needs to be done, which then is all kind of tied together with the Kronspine, which gives the list something it doesn't have and most Cities lists don't have, and that's the space to operate and do all of these things. When you send a Kronspine up the center of the board, right, that's 2 turns, or at least a turn and a half, that your opponent has to dedicate nearly a majority of its army to, or just let it live, ignore it. So that gives you so much room to set up, to move, to harass, to get to other parts of the board, to lock up objectives, to make them come to you. And so as I kind of went through this thing, you talked about the Rune Lord being stacked, right? That's where we get stuck on the idea is we have 1 hero and then 1 named character. So somebody's getting all the toys. And that was the Rune Lord. It fits well because the Arcane Tome gives it the extra deny, the extra unbind, and the extra dispel, which is cool. The casting is neat for it. Natural thing that he had was his own spell, or his own chant, his own prayer, which is the extra rend, which is the most important one. So heal is kind of an extra, like, oh no, this is a get out of jail card. I used it on some Fulminators when they were at 1 wound with a what's it called, a plague token on them, so that they wouldn't die, just to make sure that they would survive that extra piece.
By the way, I quickly realized I was using a template from a last, and I'm like, you didn't have double battle regiment. I was waiting for.
Oh, no.
I was like, why has he 10 drops with double battle regiment? No, I just quickly fixed that up. So, yeah, you good.
Yeah, I actually ran Expert Conquerors, Bounty Hunters, and Vanguard. And so Expert Conquerors are obviously the things that can be extra conquerors here. Those 40 block of peace, which counts as 120 models when you put them on a center objective, or they can go and beat the other 10 model units. The Bounty Hunters were the Sky Wardens, the Fulminators, and the Paladors. And then in the Vanguard was the Gun Hauler and the Rune Lord. Just because sometimes you just want to make sure you get that extra 6 inches on the run, and you can do it for free. And so sometimes the Rune Lord has to keep up with everybody else running, and sometimes it's the Gun Hauler that has to go and get that objective on a far thing that's screened out by somebody else. And so that was
a couple of quick questions from the chat. What about the Frost Heart with a tome, the Arcane Tome? Do you have any thoughts on? Because that's a nice little combination. It's a lot of points though. That was it. Frost Heart's what, 300-400 points somewhere?
Yeah, 305 and 315, something like that. And then the tome. Yeah, I actually tried that out a bit. The one thing that it came down to is it doesn't do any damage. Sure, you can get off the ignite weapons or the flaming weapons, but its profile degrades so quickly because it's one of the older profiles. It degrades every 3 wounds. yes, you survive the entire game, but for that many points, I needed more damage. I needed it to do more than just like be in a spot. And so that's what the Kronspine, does. It survives for a couple of turns, but does a ton more damage on the output.
We really need the Flame Phoenix to get an update on the language, because I think it only does mortal wounds now on a move. We need it to have an update on like run and retreat as well.
Yeah.
Because and the other call that I want to make as well, Gareth making a good comment, is, you look at this and go, right, well, I want to kill that Rune Lord, right? It's the general, it's got a whole bunch of things. But by doing that, by killing the Rune Lord, you actually make the Kronspine better. And maybe we've kind of danced around this a little bit. So the Rune Lord dies, or whoever the Kronspine's attached to dies. What happens to the Kronspine, and why is it not actually a big risk?
Yeah. So first off, it goes wild, right? And that makes you think in your head, oh God, it's going to attack the nearest things. And sure, it does that, but only after you control the movement of where it goes. So it gains run and charge. So you run it as close as you can to the enemy that you want it to go after. It has to charge. I believe it's the nearest unit or nearest endless spell. So just put yourself in a good spot where you want to do that. But then it gains +1 to hit and +1 to wound, which are massive. It goes to a 2/2 on all of its stats profile. And
it can run and charge as well, right?
Yes.
It can't retreat. It can never retreat, but you can run and charge as well. So the threat range when it goes wild is just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we kind of talked earlier, I saw some chat come up, which is the idea of like putting it on a sorcerer or something. It's the catch-22 you give to your opponent. You say, do you want to kill my general and deny me that extra command point and the other pieces? And then if you do so, you get this Kronspine who's about to go nuts on your army. It's almost a way for you to protect a piece while also like having that capability to then let that piece die if you need to. And so it puts your opponent in a tough choice. And the more tough choices you give an opponent at a competitive level, the better you are, or the better chance you have of something going your way. One of those choices being made that actually benefits you.
And that's why the Tom Guan version of the Kronspine combined with the Battle Mage, if you use something like the Rune Lord or some type of small wizard, you've got to keep within 18 inches of the Kronspine. And because it's just moving forward and getting into combat, you fall out of that 18 inches really easily. But with this move 15 Battle Mage on Griffin, it's very easy to be moving up the board in conjunction, getting the +1 to cast, in addition to any other bonuses to cast. So you've got, and like, let's be honest, if I've got a Kronspine and I've got a Battle Mage of Gur both on the table, we know the damage is going to the Kronspine. No, everyone's going to ignore the Wizard Griffin.
Yep, they're either going to try to snipe it, or they're going to be like, all right, well, it can't fight me, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, just damned if you do, damned if you don't. You kill the wizard, cool, it goes wild. You don't kill the wizard, I'm going to do my wizardy type things, and there's a lot of cool, like either way, you do what you want to do. As Matt's saying, there's pros and cons either way.
Yep.
But if you didn't have the Kronspine, and I know some people are a bit funny about the Kronspine, hell, we've seen some tournaments flat out ban the Kronspine. How would you tweak this list if you were going to a tournament that said no Kronspine? Would you bring in what? Stormcast Dragons, Fulminators? Would you just drop that concept?
I think I would maybe move into something that has either more Alpha Strike potential. I would probably move into the Hallowheart piece, pump up some Dracothian Guard Fulminators, teleport them across the board with a pendant guy, give them full stat set of stuff, and then just let them nuke something, right? Some combination that plays a different angle. The Kronspine does something in this list that isn't really replicatable if you're trying to do something else. And so you would just kind of have to change out where you're going with it.
Yeah, although Autumn, I in one side of me wants to say yes, the other side just says point it appropriately. I think 400 points we all agree is a little bit cheap. So if it was on the 550 mark, different story. That was just a number I pulled out of my backside. I actually don't know how you'd point it appropriately, but 400 is definitely too cheap. Just like we know Purple Sun at 70 points is a little bit too cheap.
Yeah, and I think when we look at the top 8 of the Nova and then maybe into the top 16, if you count them all out, I think the top 8 had 1 Kronspine in it.
Yeah.
And the top 16 had 3, maybe 4. Because some armies cannot afford to take that and still do their strategy. Because it also bans allies from other places. So when you're a Seraphon player and going, I need an assassin, do you take the Kronspine or do you take the Celestin Prime? You can only get one of them. You can't get both. And Daughters of Cain has Morathi. It does the Kronspine thing, but better, right? And then Tzeentch, which one used it the exact same way I did, which was go make some space. Go give us some space so our casters can sit behind it. So I think that like for the armies that it's working in, it's giving them something they don't have. But I think 450 would be a fair use of it as well. And I think, I think 450, 500 is pretty getting close to where it should be.
Yeah. Sun is a whole different story.
Yeah.
I think was it Hammerfest, which is happening right now in Texas. They've changed Purple Sun to be D6 mortal wounds, I think it is, as opposed to the flat out roller. Well, he still does the -1 rend, but it's just D6 mortal wounds. And I remember Purple Sun's gone through a whole bunch of iterations. I think it did D6 mortal wounds, but against monsters it was 2D6, which was fine. Like it was pointed at 100 points. It was fine. I think we might see an adjustment coming up in the near future. We're almost at the halfway mark with this GHB, and that's when they dropped the hunt. So there could be some changes coming up. But I think when I look at this, I think one thing I really want to call out here, folks, is that Cities of Sigmar, it's tempting to go all in. You go all in on the free guild guard, and it means you got your great swords, your swordsmen, your crossbowmen, your handgunners. But when you look at this particular list, you haven't gone all in. You got a bit of Duata, and you got a bit of elves, you got a bit of Stormcast. You've gone in and tapped in. And I think I did a video like 2 years ago, and I talked about this internal synergy of cities. I look at this and look for minimum power pairs. If I go, right, if I'm going to take Phoenix Guard, I'm going to at least take an Anointed on foot, and that's my power pair. And that's how I try to break up my thinking, having at least 3 threats, if not 4 threats in my list. And I'm looking for power pairs. So that's where like the Sorceress on foot will combine well with the Dark Shards if you want to have a synergy. You can have some independent threats. The Fulminators and the Paladors can act independently. They don't need any support. But that's how I make sense of cities.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I was looking at. I want a shooting piece, so I want the Rune Lord to go with the Iron Drakes. The Longbeards, I have to have an extra battle line, and that just makes sense there, right? I need something that can do harassments and move. Well, I got a gun hauler with the Skywardens. They go together. The Fulminators, obviously, they work on independently. The Paladors, kind of the same thing, but with more mobility. And then you've got the 2 things that are just there to pick on stuff. And that's the Dark Shards to get into position so they just always can shoot. But mostly it's there to like move very fast, that 6-inch move, and then still be able to shoot afterwards, right? They can do 4 wounds, right, to a 5-up save type of thing. That's kind of what they're shooting for. And then Deloria, who's like, bring your wizard anywhere near me and I will get rid of it. And so her area denial is fantastic.
And because she gets, and if anyone hasn't looked at the War Scroll, if she doesn't move, which obviously includes setup, she gets 2 shots. So she gets an extra attack. So
and a +1 to hit too,
and the +1 to hit as well. So that's why she worked really well in Living City, because you can just drop her on the side of the board. If you've got any of those deep striking, Tempest doesn't have that. But you'd get 2 shots. Were they 3s and 3s?
Yeah, it's 3s and 3s, -2 damage, double damage against wizards and demons. But then if you don't move, +1 to hit. And then if you're within 12 inches of the Rune Lord here with Hawkeye, it's a +1 to wound. So you're sitting at 2s and 2s. Very consistent damage.
Yeah, it's when it's happened to me in the past. And mind you, like my opponent was my mate Dave was shooting my Stormcast, so all my wizards are like a 3-up armor save. The -1 just didn't get through. But if you're starting to fight like bin chickens, like the Lord of Change or something, it's probably a little bit more squishy. You might find a little bit more valuable with the -1. I think that's probably my only criticism to her, but she's 115 points.
I think she actually said -2 now.
Is it -2? I thought
I
it
think
was
so.
-1. Or maybe it was because I was like on cover and maybe I was doing like all out defense. Like I felt like that base 3-up save. Like I wasn't really kind of cutting through. Yeah, you're probably right. But
the -2 against the 5-up save guys, those heroes get punished.
Yeah, I mean, Stormcast, all their wizards are 3-up. So
they're like
take that out of context. Most wizards are on 4 at best.
Yeah.
A couple of them will be the big heroes. Not nice against Nagash, who's not getting his 6-up ward as well. I know you had an alternative to this. Just quickly changed. I know you had an alternative version. You switched heal to curse. You switched out the Paladors to another unit of Fulminators. Anything else you want to call out?
The Dark Shards went down to Dread Spears. I used it mostly for the movement, and so there was a lot of times where they were sitting back and not getting that effort because they had to go and protect the back lines. If I'm doing that, give me my 30 points back. It just gives you a little more flexibility with your list. And then the Paladors, they did okay, but I was already moving enough with the Gun Hauler and the Sky Wardens. It was like overkill. And a lot of the times there was this give and take where I would hit them with Fulminators, delete their unit. They would hit me and my Fulminators would be gone. And now I would have to shoot them with something that I was already planning on shooting something else with. To have that second Fulminator come in, like that just trumps the board space. Against Sons of Bahamut, which I saw a lot more than I expected to see at the event. Fulminators are fantastic. Way better in that matchup than Paladors.
And it's probably going to be something, especially with Sons getting a new book very soon. We know it's coming. You're going to need to be able to go back into that DPS check, because I know some people watching this video will be a purist. They'll go, I don't want to go Stormcast. I want to keep within my book. And cool, you do you.
Yeah.
But who is going to be your hammer? Who's going to be your big damage? I guess if you're looking at this going, well, I don't want Fulminators, then you're probably closest is going to be Demigryph Knights.
Yeah.
But you're going to notice that the output of Demigryph Knights are just not nearly as much. And yeah, they're a bit tanky, right? The 3 wounds each. I think it's a 3-up armor save before the 2-ups and things like that. But if you look at the mortal wound and on the charge, the Fulminators do 3 damage apiece.
Yeah.
Demis just don't do that. So if you have to go into a Gargant check, you need something that's going to do reliable high damage. And unfortunately, we just don't have it. Like the Drakespawn Knights are not going to do it. Your Free Guild General and Griffin's not going to do it. You've got to tap into your ally pool. Or you just completely forget about that strategy and you go into all-end shooting. So you do your crossbows, 30 crossbows who are doing 60 shots. You look at everything else that can do it, because we're just not that good in melee.
Yeah, and I think it's because the 4-up to wound on so many pieces. That ends up being the problem. Is like, yeah, I hit on 3s, but you wound on 4s on a lot of this stuff, where most things across Stormcast are wounding on 3s, some wounding on 2s. Like that's the big trade-off on the piece. And I think Curse was a big change from heal. I didn't have to face any, but I was terrified of facing like a Seraphon, Thunder Lizards, and just like, I'm all rend. I'm very little mortal wounds. And the Bastiladon with all-out defense is a nightmare to try to get through with rend. So putting a curse on that and then letting all your shots kind of do the work first, right? Because the hits then apply the mortal wounds, then you roll the saves, so then the saves go lower and lower. So
did you play again against Nighthorn at all?
I did not. I played I was okay against Nighthaunt. I think the Fulminators do enough against Nighthaunt at the bounty hunter level that you get to the objectives first. Usually Nighthaunt's going to give you the turn because they want to charge you, right? So you get to the objectives first, and you can screen out enough that your shooting can start whittling down. But the Fulminators, when they hit a unit, like even if they half it, right? Say you get 6 through and they half that down to 3, that's still 12 damage, right? And then they reduce that to 10 to 8, whatever it is, right? That's still like an entire unit scooped up for the ones that are a problem.
Yeah, I always try to build lists that have mortal wounds, a good amount of mortal wounds, rend, and volume. So, and probably we struggle with mortal wounds, which is why I talked about swords. My Hurricanum has always been good for me, getting the +1 to cast with the mortal wounds from the Storm of Shemtek.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unreliable if like a Gotrek's coming, because he'll then reduce that Storm of Shemtek to 1 mortal wound and probably pass it on a 3. But would you actually include a Gotrek? I know for a while Cities really enjoyed him, because he's probably another combat monster. If you don't want to do, Kronspine, you don't want to do Fulminators. He plays that role.
I absolutely see him doing it, especially in matchups that are the Storms Sons of Bahamut matchup. Like, I think he's probably better than the Kronspine in that matchup. But the Leithoth thing makes me think, and it's one of the reasons I took it this way. The grapple launchers and the Kronspine prevent retreat. And so the idea is to, you can get the Nighthaunt stuck and then they can't move, because their whole thing is retreat, charge again, right? You can lock them down. And if they can't retreat and charge, there are a lot of 3s and 4s, 4s and 3s, whatever it is, right? For their piece. They get a lot of their bonus from that charge allegiance ability.
Yeah, and Scarlet Doom, if they take that, which is the most popular of their sub factions, do mortals on the charge as well. So, the Kronspine's perfect for tying that up. Is there anything else you'd add? I mean, again, this is the beautiful thing about Cities, is that if you don't like KO, there's a lot of different options, and we've talked about like what makes this list come to life. Like obviously having some deep striking ability coming in from reserve helps us score battle tactics, lets us get into some, because like we don't have a lot of long range threats. At best, most of our stuff is medium range threats. Yep. We have medium range damage. We have medium range wizards. Yeah. Everything's medium. So if you pull through your ally pool, awesome. If not, stay in your lane, no problem. You can build a free guild list with the free guild general with, handgunners, crossbowmen, swordsmen. If you want to build around what we used to see, like the Rune Lord, with what was the combination? If you want to do bridge with the,
bridge Iron Drakes and Rune Lord. Yeah, there's a cool version which is like Warden King Iron Breakers, or not Warden King Hammerers, and then send them forward. So you're like, all right, I've got 60 attacks. That's 10 mortal wounds flat off the top, right? And then all the hits. So there's some fun ways to get some changes up. If you're like, I don't want fulminators, you could still find ways to do that. I just prefer the 10-inch move.
Question, actually, Ian's reminded me of this. So thanks, Ian. 2 thumbs up from a 2x2 fulminator list. But I'm sure some people are thinking, well, why not a unit of 4? Pros and cons, right? You could get a better rally. You could hit harder.
I think there are 2 reasons for me specifically. I want a fulminator on either flank to be able to protect either flank for which is coming. If I put 4, they can send small units into it. They can screen it better. And like you said earlier, Horrorghast is a thing now, right? And Horrorghast is terrifying if you lose a couple fulminators and have a loss in some bravery. Right, you don't want to rely on 230 points getting picked up if you roll a 4+. Like if they're giving you some bravery negatives, that's kind of scary. But yeah, the ability to also send one hit, get hit back, and then send the next one after to finish that up. Every I think game is going to come down to the trades that you make. Are you trading up each time, or are you trading down? Are you trading for position? And so each trade, you want to have something that you're going to be able to follow up with. And I think that's why I go 2x2 versus 1x4.
And, like there's other cool options. Like there's so many great things, like I think about this list, if I want movement shenanigans and I want to take KO, I could be using, I could be like tapping into some Anvil Guard type strategies, or even using, the gyrocopters. I could be using gyrocopters as cheap movement type shenanigans. There's stuff that's internally, but it's just unfortunate that things outside of our book are just better
Yeah,
And
that's
the way
true.
coalition, and the irony of it all is that the way that coalition works for us is a little bit different to the way coalition works for chaos. So we do get some little boost with the keyword bingo. But talk to me about deployment. You know, as we kind of wrap this up, and I've got a few extra questions I want to ask, but how do you deploy as a cities player? Because I know for me, synergy is key. It's making sure, because there's so much internal synergy and keywords, you got to really think about that. But what advice would you give me with deployment?
I think for this list in deployment, right? Because every list is kind of deploys a little different for what it is. Being a 10 drop, you get to see what the battle regiments are doing, right? They set it up. You know what their initial kind of push is going to be. And so you counter that push with the Kronspine. You say, okay, Kronspine, I'm going to set you in front of this giant thing that's going to come at me. Okay, now they have to make a decision. Are they going to go back or forth from that? Next level is the set of screens, right? I want to deploy the set of screens that I know that I'm going to have to move first. So when I think of deployment, I say, okay, I need to first block what my opponent's going to do. And so that's maybe putting the Rune Lord in to make sure that it gets into deny range, right? Into unbind range, right? Making sure those are set up well. The next is screen, right? How am I going to stop them from doing the piece they're going to do? And then after that is, what am I going to do next, right? If I'm going to let them hit this screen, am I going to have my guys close enough to unleash hell? Or with like Iron Jaws, right? I unleash hell on one of them, but they kill it with the stomp, say the Maw Crusher, and he just piles into me anyways. So I'm like, okay, so maybe I need a second level of screening, or maybe I need something else. And then a lot of the times I personally use those teleporting units, this one in particular, these Sky Wardens and the things, to zone out the back line, right? I can be patient with them. They have a 24-inch range for shooting. I can sit them back there. I can make my opponent deploy his things in bad spots where they're not going to be effective. It happened with Stormcast Eternals. They had 2 sets of dragons in the sky waiting to come down and wreck my back line. And I'm like, okay, well, for the first 2 turns, I'm not going to do anything with these, right? So on turn 3, he's feeling the pressure and he has to bring them down. We make some positive trades, right? I'm in a better position at the end of it. And then I move my guys down the line, take the objectives, do the piece that they need to do. So I'm always thinking that, how do I block my opponent first from doing their strategy, right? Then how do I protect myself so I can do my strategy? And then what am I going to do on my next turn that I'm setting it up?
Yeah, no, I like. There's a lot. I hope cities players like pause that, rewind it, go back. There's a lot of good things, and like I love the psychology of, look, you don't need to be 1 drop because you're not alpha aggressive. Your spells aren't going to be in range. So who goes first, who goes second, doesn't really matter usually for cities. One thing I really enjoy as well is that the alternative to what you just said with, like, to say the Kronspine, is I don't deploy it first. I could deploy it last. Especially if people are like 3 drops, 2 drops, 1 drop. Go, cool, you drop your whole thing. I'll drop Aether Wings. I'll drop a unit of Free Guild Guard. Cool. Drop your whole army. And they're like, oh, where's he going to put the Kronspine? What's he going to do? Where's the threat's going to be? And you can really throw somebody off as you piecemeal around and look for their weaknesses and then go, right, well, this is how I'm going to kind of handle it. So Battle Regiment isn't always the best way to, and it's why it's never been an automatic pick for me.
Yeah, I agree.
And Matt in the chat's perfect example. And I think probably why I love cities the most is I'm a counterplay type player. I love to see the battlefield that go, right, the battle plan, the opponent, the scoring conditions, how does my army respond? And I talked about this being a utility type army. Mm-hmm. We're perfect for reaction.
Yes.
So we play it. And we trade up. We trade up because most of our people are cheap.
Always trade up.
But most of our people are so cheap. Like, it's easy to trade up. So it's not reliable. A couple of other questions, I guess, is how do I beat you? If I'm playing against cities, or I guess the counter to that would be, if I'm a cities player, how do I not lose? Like, what's the things I need to protect, or what are the things that I need to watch out for?
I think the thing that I lost the most to was impatience. There was a lot of times playing cities where, like, you want to use the things you have because you're like, oh, I can do damage, I can take out this unit, blah, blah, blah. And then you get like all excited and you do it. yeah, but that should have been maybe done next turn, not this turn, right? So the things that I lose to were specifically the things that do what I do better, which were the Seraphon and the Daughters of Cain bow snakes. So the only one I lost to was bow snakes, and she made top 8 with it. And so they have a 24-inch range. They move more than me. They shoot twice. They do mortal wounds. So I was like, okay, I can get rid of them if I can do this thing and that. And so I aggressively pushed, did damage. They rally. I'm in a great position, except if I don't win the priority. So then as I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, cool. If it's my turn next, I do this and I'm in a great spot. But because I was so aggressive and trying to like make as much impact because of what they had, it mispositioned me for the double turn to come. And so if I would have just took it a little slower, I could have racked up, 4 or 5 more points. I was on the objectives. They're a very castle-y army. They got to move out. Like, let them spread out. Let them break up. There are things like, just because I had won the game before that on turn 2, like killed all of his stuff, did all that. Like, it was really aggressive to beat Chaos Knights by being aggressive, like getting in there, screening them out. Daughters of Cain plays so different. You have to change your mindset on each time, but be patient. Be patient with the things you have, because like it may look good for the piece, but like if you can't think of what you're going to do next with that piece, like don't make that move yet. And so that's where I was like, all right, this is what I need to be doing. So that helped a lot as I went into the Nurgle matchups. I went back-to-back Nurgles, which is all about playing for board position. One was, I think it was 50 or 60 Plague Bearers, and the other one was a ton of Flies and Blight Kings. So like 2 totally different separates, but like that's the time when you got to play slower. You got to like think about your piece, this move and your next move. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, patience. Be patient with it. And if you want to beat me, like, let's get excited, let's have fun. And then I'm like, oh crap, we're just doing it.
How do you think about, because that's one thing that probably, I'm going to pull us back for a second, because a lot of people can struggle at times because, and you hear when people say, I lost the game because of a double turn. And it's not that you lost the game because of double turn. Double turn's been happening since the dawn of time in Age of Sigmar, right? It's about you overextended your hand being too aggressive, and you didn't think about the defensive play. You didn't think about how did I set myself up in case I fail to win the priority roll, or you put too much of your optimism in one roll and your strategy crumbles. So how as a Cities player do you prepare for the double turn, or how do you make sure that you don't put yourself, you've overextended, you haven't put yourself in a bad spot where your opponent can overcapitalize?
Yeah, I think it's use those cheap units that you talked about. Like sometimes the trade is the time and the tempo that is causing. And so those cheap units, those 85-point units, those 100-point units that are those early screens, like use those to get you that flexibility if the turn is going to go your way or not go your way. Right. So don't throw away your units for a thing now, because you can still get more points out of them later. So think about that with cities, is the idea that like, oh, I might retreat now and I just might set up and wait. I might, go to the objective, but I'm not going to charge. I'm going to just stand there. Right. I'm going to outbody them. Right. So a lot of the times it might feel like you're wasting a unit, but by not doing a thing that you may not trade properly with, like will give you that tempo that in case the double turn doesn't go your way, you minimize the effects that it's going to do to your core pieces of your army.
Yeah, I think a lot about positioning, pre-measuring to go, right, well, if I was to lose this priority roll, it is a 12-inch gap between us. So their movement is 5. That means it's a 7-inch charge. And you start looking at the maths of going, well, I need to make sure that when I move my hero, it's still going to be behind a line of sight blocking terrain, or it's in cover. Or as you mentioned, instead of moving the full distance and trying to set up for a charge, maybe just move on to the objective, and instead of being at the front of the objective, be in the center.
Yeah.
And it's a couple of extra inches that's going to make your opponent's charge or movement a little bit harder, but it's also guarantee you've got the most amount of bodies. And if you had to redeploy, you still got your bodies on the objective. So I think there's a lot of really good. Anything else you'd add to that? Because it's one thing, because cities don't take a punch very well. And there is a lot of, you are thinking a couple of turns in advance with this. And it's not big brain kind of
No.
4D chess, but you have a lot of tools playing a lot of different ways. So you need to use your tools appropriately.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I think what you brought up with the redeploy piece, like cities is very primed to use redeploy by having these units that can come up, can get in the way, right? And then force your opponent to them. Your opponent wants to get real close, but you can use these type of command abilities, the rally, the redeploy, the unleash hell. Like, think about these where you're going to maximize those basic ones that aren't all out attack, all out defense. So you can use those to make those tools just a little bit better, because everything in cities has a role it fills, and trying to use it outside of that role is usually how we end up doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Matt's talking as well, like, knowing, practice and obviously doing some maths hammer helps you understand probability, which is key. But the other thing as well, I do a lot of, especially because, again, I run a lot of free guild guards. So I'm running blocks of 20s and 30s, right? So when I'm pulling out, well, I guess it depends on what I want to do. If I want to lock somebody in combat and I've got like an inspiring presence up my sleeve, the way I pull models out is from the back in order to keep them locked into combat and deny them. So if I lose the priority roll, cool, you're still in combat at least for a turn, happy days. But if I want to be a bit more aggressive, then I'll pull the models out of combat so that if I win it, or I know that I'm going to, I'm going second in the battle round, then I've pulled enough models out that I'm outside of 3 that I can now do a rally because I've set myself up. So there's a lot of thinking and a lot of ideas, at least I found with cities. Because I'm running, like, I'm not running Stormcast where I've got 5 models. I'm running 20, 30, 15.
Yeah, and you're also usually running more units too, right? So you're thinking of like, okay, how can I maximize these units? Sometimes that's the most powerful thing, is to have, your opponent has 5 units that can kill your entire army, and you've got 10 units that can make their life just real annoying, right? They have to make a decision every single time to maximize those 5, while you have to make those decisions harder and harder for them to make.
One other thing that I do, I don't know if you do this, but again, because I'm running like 5 wound heroes that are supporting, again, 10 to 20 type models, I'm always very careful of where I put my little 5 wound hero. And I'm always pre-measuring to make sure that it's 3 and a bit inches away from the enemy, right? So my hero will be 3 inches in range of my troops, but then the base difference between my unit is 3.5. So no matter what your opponent can do, I'm blocking it off from doing any damage, because it's happened to me too many times where I've had my hero base to my troops. The enemy comes in with a 2 or 3 inch attack. It fights over, kills that key piece that was key buff, keep whatever. And then the unit crumbles because they've got crap bravery. They just don't do what they need to do. And I lose too much in the trade.
Yeah, I think if the 5 wound heroes are in combat, something's gone wrong. And like you got to fight your way out of it at that point, but don't put them in the situations that's like going to get them there.
Final question, Nick, and we'll kind of wrap this up. This has been a great discussion, and anyone knows I talk cities until the cows come home. I love cities. I love cities. It's I'm a little bit concerned about Dawnbringers. Not that I'm freaking out, but I have that empire-y type feel. I love the mustaches. I love the puffy shirts. I love that, and I do wonder what Dawnbringers will do. I have a prediction that maybe Dawnbringers will be like Stormcast, where you have like Signs of the Storm and Stormkeep, and whether you want to be, because Cities of Sigmar is about building the cities of Sigmar. It's a defensive type of army. And I wonder if the Dawnbringers, which are go outside and go fight for the mortal realms, is more of the offensive. And maybe that's how they restructure. I don't know. That's my prediction, but I don't actually know. What's one thing we can add to this faction? We talked a little bit about monsters. Is there anything else we want to add to this particular army?
I think it's one thing that's going to end up being like probably the most controversial piece of the change is like the identity that is able to be like coherent across all of cities. Right now, that's both the thing that's lacking, right? Each city is independent. It doesn't feel like Cities of Sigmar, right? It feels like a bunch of things. Like in other books, you have very coherent things that feel like they all click together in some way. But also at the same time, that could be one of the core like allegiant defining pieces. Because right now the allegiant defining pieces we have are you can take Stormcast and your general doesn't die or gets good advice, right? It's like there can be something where Dawnbringers can give an identity or at least start shaping a identity to what Cities is. Cities becomes empowered by Sigmar or whatever it is to be his will, his hand for the repopulation, while Stormcasts are the hunt down the big baddies, right? And so, you know, there's a lot of chances in there where it can become something else, but at the same time, I hope it doesn't lose the spirit that it has, which is a bunch of disparate factions coming together to defend their homes against what's out there.
See, it's interesting you say that because I'm the complete opposite. I want unity. Like when I look at, like I look over the fence to Imperial Guard, and there's, you know, there's the Catachans and there's different types of fields, right? They're the humans of the Imperium, but there's a different flavor. When I look at a Cities of Sigmar army, Hallowheart doesn't feel any different to Tempest to Anvil Guard. And I don't know how they do that. You know, I don't know if it means that there's upgrade sprues and kits and bits that you can possibly do to have, you know, some, like, I'm not saying to redesign the entire line that Dwarden look like elves that look like, you know, it's just the size, but it's like, how can I unify them with a shield? How can I unify them with headdresses or something that makes Hallowheart feel Hallowhearty? But then I have Tempest-eye, which feels Tempest-eye. That to me is what I would love to see in whatever Dawnbringers brings to the table. And maybe it is shields, like that shields and some iconography like they've done with 40K.
Yeah, it could be. I think that'd be pretty cool. Something that brings it across that isn't just like a paint scheme or something else, right?
Yeah, like paint schemes don't mean anything. It's not like 40K with Space Marines, right? Like blue is, you know, Ultramarines, and like my cities doesn't change. It doesn't, you can never tell.
Yeah.
But Nick, if people want to talk, this has been great. Again, we keep talking about this till cows come home. I love Cities. And I hope and pray that this bad boy comes back. Please, please.
That'd be cool.
So good. I miss my Walter. If people wanted to talk to you, are you online anywhere? Twitter, Facebook, Discord?
No, but
just hiding.
Any event, feel free to come up, say hi. We'll talk Cities, we'll talk Warhammer, we'll talk whatever it is to be. Love the game, love the people. So I think that was the biggest thing that I felt Nova had, was the camaraderie, bringing that back. So feel free to come up, say hi, make connections.
You coming to LVO?
I would like to. We're going to see.
Come. I'll see you there.
All right.
I'll see you there. Nick, this has been awesome. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Thank you, patrons. You're all legends. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we brought up something a little bit different. We've had a couple of different discussions on Living City and Phoenician, and there's been a whole bunch of cities discussions. And I think, you know, my closing comment would be, is to look at your book with fresh eyes now that Living City has gotten a bit of a change. We've had new war scrolls, the Hexbane we've talked a little bit about, love it. I think we've got an emerging meta of dragons. We have ogres, we have Lumineth and Zench coming up pretty soon, let alone Chaos. So I think now is a good time to relook at your list and go, well, you know, is it time for Hallowheart? Is it time for Tempest-eye? Is there units that might be anti-magic like the Anointed or the Rune Lord or something that you like? Is the Luminarch? Is it good now to bring back the Luminarch for its +1 to unbind, and it has that 30-inch shot? It's a good time to revisit. I think there's a lot of great things we can unpack. But Nick, you're a legend. Thank you, chat. Thank you so much for joining. If you watch this on the replay, thank you, and chat to you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AOS Coast Patreons and YouTube members who are going in, and the funds of supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.